All right, good to see everybody tonight for Bible study. We are online for this one more week, and then we'll be back in person for next Wednesday night, the 10th. But thanks for joining us on Facebook and on Zoom. And we're going to continue talking about idols tonight, and we're spinning it a little bit because I want you to see the devastation that's caused by idols. Because some of us would. There's philosophical discussions that we could have, and before we do that, let's say a prayer, if that's okay. Dear Lord, join us tonight, lead the Bible study, prepare our hearts and minds to receive it, and Lord, open the Bible to us, explain it to us, let it make sense to us, in Jesus' name, amen. All right, so some of us, from a philosophical standpoint, might have the questions of, is God all powerful, omnipotent, right? And if he's not, if evil exists and he can't do anything about it, that makes him impotent, without power. And so if he makes a promise and it doesn't come to fruition, what does that mean about God? And so some of us, in terms of outside atheists, agnostics, those kind of folks outside would say, God didn't have the power to make it happen. Something got in the way, and he didn't do that. And so I want us to see that tonight. We can really examine, and we'll build off of the Solomon stuff that we talked about on Sunday. And we're going to talk about the division after Solomon dies, and Jeroboam and Rehoboam. And you know that God said, hey, for David's family was going to sit on the throne of Israel, and Judah, Israel combined. You remember under David, it was all together. The northern kingdoms, there were 10, the southern kingdom of 1. Remember, there's another to make it 12. There's the Levites. That's one of the sons of Jacob, one of the 12 sons. And the Levites were the priestly group. And so they were spread throughout all of the territory. So they didn't get an allotment of land. There were really 11 allotments. And then the Levites served in all of those areas as priests and as workers in the community church and all of that kind of stuff. And so you're sitting here and you're looking at that, and you're talking about what was God's plan in all of this, is that Solomon was going to be king over the joint Israel and Judah together, one kingdom that David had united, and that was the plan. And it didn't happen that way. When he died, it was split. And Jeroboam took 10 tribes in the north, and his son Rehoboam took 1 tribe in the south. And so all of us would say God's plan didn't come to fruition. And then we have different reasons for that. And the reasons don't lie with God. The reasons lie with us. Because it's what we choose to do with that information. Once we hear it, once we know that that's what's going to happen, if we let idols creep into our lives, then we see our kingdom crumble, as opposed to when we allow God's will to be done. His kingdom is built and we get pulled along for the ride. We get to experience that and participate in part of it. So let's look together. Let's look at the plan that God had for Jeroboam. So we're going to be in chapter 11 of 1 Kings. And let's look in verse 26 to start with. So 1 Kings 11:26, Old Testament. And this is this division that's happening right after Solomon's death, right? This is what's going on. So it says, also Jeroboam, son of Nebat, rebelled against the king. He was one of Solomon's officials, an Ephraimite from Zereda, and his mother was a widow named Zeruiah. Here is the account of how he rebelled against the king. Solomon had built the terraces and filled the gap in the wall of the city of David his father. Now Jeroboam was a man of standing, and when Solomon saw how well the young man did his work, he put him in charge of the whole labor force of the tribes of Joseph. About that time, Jeroboam was going out of Jerusalem, and Ahijah, the prophet of Shiloh, met him on the way wearing a cloak. Remember, this is one of the priests in that line of Levite that I was talking about. This is a prophet that is there, Ahijah. And it says he met him on the way wearing a new cloak. The two of them were alone out in the country, and Ahijah took hold of the new cloak he was wearing and tore it into 12 pieces. Well, that wasn't very nice. This was a new cloak. I just got it, right? But 12 pieces. Then he said to Jeroboam, take 10 pieces for yourself, for this is what the Lord, the God of Israel says. See, I am going to tear the kingdom out of Solomon's hand and give you 10 tribes. But for the sake of my servant David and the city of Jerusalem, which I have chosen out of all the tribes of Israel, he will have one tribe. I will do this because they have forsaken me and worshipped Ashtoreth, the goddess of the Sidonians, Chemosh, the god of the Moabites, and Molech, the god of the Ammonites, and have not walked in obedience to me, nor done what is right in my eyes, nor kept my decrees and laws, as David, Solomon's father, did. But I will take the whole kingdom out of Solomon's hand. I've made him ruler all the days of his life for the sake of David my servant, whom I chose, and who obeyed my commands and decrees. I will take the kingdom from his son's hands and give you 10 tribes. I will give one tribe to his son, so that David my servant may always have a lamp before me in Jerusalem, the city where I chose to put my name. However, as for you, I will take you, and you will rule over all that your heart desires. You will be king over Israel. If you do whatever I command you and walk in obedience with me and do what is right in my eyes by obeying my decrees and commands, as David my servant did, I will be with you. I will build you and here's a good word, dynasty. My oldest son is a Patriots fan and has been since birth, basically, because the Patriots were the team. And I'm not going to say Noah's a bandwagon fan, because he's not, but it was kind of easy to cheer for the Patriots because they were really good from his whole life, for the most part, and won a lot of Super Bowls. But it says, I will build you, Jeroboam, a dynasty as enduring as the one I built for David, and will give Israel to you. I will humble David's descendants because of this, but not forever. Now, that was the plan. Did you hear the if-then statement? Now, I took computer classes when I was in college and getting my master's degree. And one of the things that you do when you're typing code is you have if-then statements. If this happens, then this. And there, you build code based on some of those things. And I don't know if that's still how they do it today. I'm 1,000 years old. So, but that was, it's a depending thing. It depends. If you do this, then this will happen. And so he says, I will build for you a dynasty. It's like it's going to go on forever. You and your kids and everything will be taken care of, and you'll be king, and you'll have all the luxuries that come along with that, the notoriety, the power, the status, the prestige, all of that. And so that is the plan. That is God's plan for Jeroboam. Now, for us, we have to say, okay, so, and a couple of the words he used in there is that, did you hear the part where he listed, if you do whatever I command you and walk in obedience to me and do what is right in my eyes by obeying my decrees and commands. So he's laying out, these are the things that need to happen. You need to listen to me and obey, listen and obey. Well, that harkens back for me to like, when you come into school for the first time in kindergarten. And I was the knucklehead that went to kindergarten for 2 years because the first time I wasn't willing to sit and listen and obey, right? I was not mature enough to move on to the first grade, so I had to do kindergarten over again. And somebody would say, you failed kindergarten? Oh my gosh, what a moron, that kind of thing. Is that, yes, I was not able to finger paint and to take a nap and unable to cut out the turkey that you do with your fingers and make it with your hand. I was unable to do those things enough to get passed on to the first grade. And so for us, that is part of what our school system is based upon. It's what all of our sports are based on. It's what the theater is based on. It's what the band is based on. It's what your work will be based on. Is, do you have the ability to humble yourself enough to listen to somebody who's above you, an expert, and then to obey what they say, because they're the ones who either are going to give you a grade, they're the ones that are going to move you on, they're the ones that are going to give you a promotion, they're the ones that are going to teach you to sing or to play or to act in such a way that you won't be embarrassed on stage when you're doing that. Are you able to do that? Well, I did youth ministry for 20 years, and so we had lots of different youth come through. And I can remember one guy who he in his lifetime at this point, he's probably almost 40, has had at least 40 jobs. And the reason is because the first time that the boss turns to them and tells them to do something they don't want to do, they're like, no. And then the boss says, yes, you're going to go do that. And they go, no. And then he goes, yes, to stay working here, you're going to have to do that. And they go, well, I'll quit. Or they get fired and then move on to the next job. And it's just one right after the other because they never learned the idea of, can you sit in that seat right there, look me in the eye, listen to what I say, and then obey the instructions that I give you. And so Jeroboam, the plan was dynasty. right? And so what did he do with that information? Because he had Solomon to look at as well, and Solomon got in trouble. Solomon was supposed to have a dynasty, and what did we talk about on Sunday? 1,000 wives, right? 700 wives, 300 concubines who all wanted their own place to worship their own gods. He built them, worshiped with them to the point of that, he was worshiping as it listed there, all those different disgusting, detestable gods that weren't really gods at all, made up. And he was willing to do that on behalf of this love that he had for all these women. And so he lost his kingdom and it was split. So let's look at what Jeroboam does with this information, because would you say the opportunity for him is small or huge? Huge opportunity, right? I mean, goodness, you're set. If all I have to do is listen to God, do what he says. Well, this is what he does with that information. So it says in chapter 12, verse 25, it says, then Jeroboam fortified, and actually, let's back up a little bit because I want you to see, Rehoboam actually has the opportunity to unite the kingdom, and he listens to some people around him, advisors that he grew up with, and he tells them, I'm going to make it tougher than my dad ever was tough on you, that kind of stuff. And so Jeroboam and the 10 tribes in the north are like, no, we're not doing that, and they take off and they leave. All right, so then we pick up in verse 12:25. Then Jeroboam fortified Shechem in the hill country of Ephraim and lived there. From there he went out and built up Peniel. It's not surprising. He's making improvements, but he's also making protective things, boundaries. He's setting up, whether it is, walls or forts or moats or whatever, to keep his enemies at bay. He's preparing for what might happen, kind of deal, which is nothing wrong with that. That's actually, that's one of the things that we do to try to make sure that our dynasty is continued in terms of, God tells us to work, and there's nothing wrong with that. So in 26, he says, Jeroboam thought to himself. All right, there's problem number one, right? That is the idea that we start in our own mind coming up with some clever ideas or stuff that is there. It says, Jeroboam thought to himself, the kingdom will now likely revert to the house of David. That's Rehoboam. That is Solomon's son, Rehoboam. And he says, if these people, he's talking about his own people, go up to offer sacrifices at the temple of the Lord in Jerusalem, they will again give their allegiance to their Lord, Rehoboam, king of Judah. They will kill me and return to King Rehoboam. All right, so Solomon spent 7 years building this elaborate, beautiful, gorgeous temple that God had given him the plans for. And everybody was required, this is the way that the religion was set up, is that is where you went to make offerings and sacrifices. And there were the festivals during the year, 3, which later became 4 festivals. And they would go each time of the year. You had, like it would say, do no work for a week, and then celebrate Passover or the first fruits, or it would say celebrate Yom Kippur or Rosh Hashanah, celebrate the Feast of Tabernacles in the fall, all those Day of Atonement that I'm talking about, all of those things. And you would go to Jerusalem and you would celebrate those there. And even during Christ's time, you find them doing that they would go there. And that's why he's turning over the tables in the temple and ties the rope with a knot in it kind of deal, and takes names and turns them over and all that stuff. And he's upset because he says, you've turned my house into a house of, a den of thieves, because they're selling birds and lambs and everything you'd need, grain and, all these different things, a bull or whatever that you might go to sacrifice to get forgiveness of whatever. And so they're making a huge profit off of it. If you don't have to bring your own stuff, we'll have it here. And he is doing what I would call the pretend game in his head. If this happens, this is going to happen. And again, here are those if-then statements, right? If the people go there to worship, they're just going to fall back in line with Judah as opposed to with me here in the north as their king, and then I'm going to get killed. And I mean, it's the negativity, the pessimism that gets into our heads. And part of what you guys, and this just doesn't take rocket science. Why do people commit suicide? Mostly, I can't say all and never here or anything like that, but most of the time, Satan isolates people, gets them by themselves, and then gets in their heads. And that is us and the things that we think about when we're all by ourselves. What is it that happens to inmates that get put in maximum solitary confinement? Over time, what happens to them? They go crazy. They don't have anybody to talk to except in their head is there's this voice or voices, like when the guy that is chained in the cemetery that Jesus comes upon and he says, I am Legion, because he's got all these voices in his head, a whole army soldiers full of voices in his head that are demons, these evil spirits. That's what happens. We get isolated and Satan talks us into the fact that we're nothing, we're just low self-esteem, we got no possibilities, there's no reason to be encouraged, and we should just end it all. Everybody would like that. It would make life better for everybody else, and then they kill themselves. And so he is here, and all these things are in his head, and I want you to know, he's a king with everything going for him. The plan is still in place at this point, and he still has that voice in his head that's saying, you're not good enough. They're going to revert back to the old king, and they're going to kill you and do away with you. And we can't listen to those voices. Those voices are sometimes instilled in us by our parents or relatives, family members who said mean, nasty, awful things, disparaged us to make themselves feel better, like crabs in a bucket, pulling you back down when you're about to get out, as they want you on their level. And so those people will continually, and if it happens long enough, then we just start believing that and we start hearing those voices all the time. So here he is, and this is his next plan. Hear this. Notice in verse 28, he says, after seeking advice. From who? Who did he seek advice from? It doesn't say after prayer. It doesn't say after talking to the local priest. It doesn't say after talking to a godly person that was one of his friends or family members. It just says after seeking advice. And the advice that you might get might be a political figure, right? He's the king. You're just getting people who are trying to make sure that the kingdom lasts forever for their sake, so that they get as much money and status and prestige. They're the Klingon people that hang on as long as they can, so that they can make as much money as possible, because they know it's going to end someday, and they figure out ways to make that happen. But it says, after seeking advice, the king made 2 golden calves. He said to the people, now hang on. So golden calves, we've already dealt with one golden calf back when Moses is up on the mountain of God, and he stays up there 40 days, and the people down below go, we don't know where Moses is. We haven't seen him. He's not coming back. A lion got him. An eagle carried him off. He fell down the crevice, something like that. And so they get Aaron, and they said, we want a God we can see, like we had in Egypt. And so he says, give me all your gold earrings, nose rings, and all that stuff. We've talked about this. Anklets, whatever's made of gold, little things. And he forms and makes them a calf that they're bowing down and worshiping. And they're not just doing that. They're drinking like fish, getting drunk. They're dancing around in debauchery, sleeping with each other, all this kind of stuff in revelry, having a big party to celebrate this new golden calf that they have there that they can see with their own eyes and, worship. And so this is another one. They build 2 golden calves. Here is Jeroboam thinks this is a good idea. It's something from the past, but it also tells you that the worship of these false gods is something that was prevalent all over the world, and that because Joshua and his group, each tribe sent in to their section of this promised land back in the book of Joshua when they come in, and the ones that didn't run those people off, they intermarried with them, they lived among them. Their worship, tendencies, the people that they worship, washed over on them, and they got immersed in that culture, and it became natural for them to go, I can't see my God, and I've done so much wrong that I don't feel that relationship with God anymore, and so I can see this God, and it seems like a lot of fun to worship this God, and there's a lot of pomp and circumstance to go with it, a lot of beauty in it, there's a lot of, and everybody's doing it, boom, now I'm worshiping a golden calf. And so you're seeing it still all the way from Egypt into the promised land, and now we're here, and you're still seeing this worship of these golden calves. So he sets them up 2 places, Bethel and Dan, and it says here, it says, it is too much for you to go up to Jerusalem. Here are your gods. I'm doing it for convenience sake, right? It's a corner drugstore. It's the Walgreens or CVS right on your own corner there. It's the Shell station or the Mapco right there on your corner. How convenient is that? You can get it right there. You don't even have to go driving down the road. We'll have it delivered to your house, right? That's where we are today. We like convenience. He says, you don't have to go up to Jerusalem. Here are your gods, Israel, who brought you up out of Egypt. There it is. There's the connective piece, right? To go all the way back to Egypt. It says, one he set up in Bethel and the other in Dan. And this thing became a sin. The people came to worship the one at Bethel and went as far as Dan to worship the other. Jeroboam built shrines on high places, up on mountaintops, that's to worship the constellations, the zodiac signs, the stars and planets, and all of those things that you can see that are absolutely gorgeous. I mean, when I go to Colorado or Wyoming or Montana, I like to just get out away from all the lights and look up at the sky and just see all that is there, because it's unbelievable. And, people get caught up in that and they worship that as opposed to worshiping the God who created that. So he built shrines on high places, appointed priests from all sorts of people, even though they were not Levites. So anybody throws up their hand can be a priest. He instituted, and we do that today, by the way. We take people who are just looking to make a living. They're not called by God, and we make them pastors, and So he instituted a festival on the 15th day of the 8th month, like the festival held in Judah, and offered sacrifices on the altar. This he did in Bethel, sacrificing to the calves he had made. And at Bethel he also installed priests at the high places he had made. On the 15th day of the 8th month, the month of his own choosing, he offered sacrifices on the altar he had built at Bethel. So he instituted the festival for the Israelites and went up to the altar to make offerings. Notice this is a counterfeit. This is something that is like what we do in Jerusalem. It's not God. And what was Satan's great sin? I want to be like God. So when people make counterfeit money, they want to make it to look like real money. And that is what Satan's big, it says he masquerades as an angel of light. He's pretending. He's counterfeit. And so here is that idea is that we're going to have our own festivals. And oh, by the way, we got priests and they're just all around, but I'm going to do all the sacrificing. I'm going to kill the animals up on for each one of these things, for these sin offerings. And he's not a priest. And in fact, has no relationship with God whatsoever. He's the king. And so you can see that he has already broken the if-then statement, right? That is, God said, I will make you a dynasty. And what ends up happening in Jeroboam's life is God raises up somebody that comes after him, and that person becomes king. And as they're becoming king, they go and they not only kill Jeroboam's son, but they kill all of Jeroboam's males, all of them, his whole family. They wipe out Jeroboam's existence and his inheritance, everybody. There's not one person left that you would say is part of Jeroboam's family. That's what this next guy, that's how evil he was, that he went and did to assure his own, that there wouldn't be any competition for his status as king. And he destroys Jeroboam's family completely. And then so the outside of Christianity folks would say, the atheists and the agnostics and those folks would say, hey, God said his word. It's like they're referring to the Pope in the Catholic Church, because in Catholic belief from way back is that whatever the Pope says is law. So if he puts an edict out there, it can't be revoked. You have to follow it forever. And of course, some popes have said really crazy things, so they just ignore it. They just kind of close that book and slide it somewhere, and we don't refer to that. We don't even think about that, and they ignore it and they don't worry about it. But it's still out there that this Pope said this and that this was law, kind of deal. And that's what Jeroboam is doing here, is that he's created all of this stuff, and God said this was going to happen. So if it didn't happen, that means God is not omnipotent, that God doesn't have the power. No, that's not what it means. It means this. It means that an all-powerful God, it means that the creator of the universe loved us so much that he gave us free will. He gave up part of his power to allow us to have that power to choose. And in so doing, we can choose God or not God. If we choose God, what is? God is all good. God is love. All of that. If we choose not God, what are we left with? Evil. We're left with, right? That is what we're left with, is everything that's not God. And so when you choose to not follow God, that's what you're left with. And so the if then is that God said, hey, this is my plan. This is what I want for you. It's the same thing he told the Israelites in Egypt when he said to them, here's the plan. I'm going to have Moses and Aaron lead you from here. Moses is he's the leader of the people, right? Aaron is his mouthpiece. He said, I'm going to lead you from here in Egypt in bondage. You say it's a furnace. It is a place of just, the toil is unbelievable, making bricks without straw for a crazy man. And I'm going to take you from here in this awful existence to the promised land that I've prepared for you. And it is a place flowing with milk and honey, right? And for all of us, we go like, oh, I don't know what milk and honey means. But it just means that there's lots of herds that you could have there of whatever kind, and that they are producing milk, which means there are children to those herds, and that means it's producing, like there's food for them to eat, and then they're mating and producing, and then there's bees, there's producing honey, and that means pollination is going on, and there's vegetables and fruit trees, and there's all this abundance that's there. And that's my plan for you all to go there and to partake in that. It is yours. I have given it to you. Go take it. And they go there, and when they get there, they're like, we should send some spies in. And that sounds rational. It sounds like something that a careful person might do. And there's really no need, but it is part of a plan, right? It is part of making a plan, and God does at times. He definitely wants us to make plans at times. And they go and they send in these spies, 12 of them, 12, one from each tribe, and they go for 40 days. And they come back, and how does the song go? 10 were bad and 2 were good. Who were the 2 good ones? Joshua and Caleb. And the other 10 said, nope, we're not going. They're like giants in there. We're like grasshoppers, and they'll kill us immediately. Yes, it's flowing with, milk and honey. Yes, it's abundant. It's incredible. Here's some of the grapes. Let me show you one, that kind of deal. It's unbelievable there. And, but we don't want to go. And so they turn and they leave. That was their choice. That was part of the free will. And God said, fine, but now this is going to happen because they didn't fulfill the if then, right? Go and take it. It's yours. I have created it for you. Follow Moses there and take the land. They were unwilling to do it. And so that's what we find here is Jeroboam said, hey, this is not not how I want to do things. And those voices inside of that voice, his own voice inside of his head said, I'd rather do something instead. So for us, when we, in our lives, God says, here's the plan for you, Chris Caldwell, or for Jill Caldwell, or for Patsy Hedrick, or Mark Lesko, or any of our friends, right? And at church, anybody, your moms and dads, cousins, whoever, that God says, here's the plan that I have you. It's for prosperity and abundance. And this is not about bags of gold. It's not about that at all. It's about God's blessing on your life. And what I have found in following Christ for, since I was 11 years old, and especially since I've gone into the ministry, and Jill was at the very inception of that, is that the two of us became one flesh, and then we went and did ministry. And then ever since then, I'm not saying that things have been peaches and cream, but God has always blessed us and provided for us. And in fact, when Mark and I have talked on several occasions because we're good friends, and he's like, man, you've lived a blessed life. And I'm like, and that's somebody from the outside looking in. And that's not me bragging. That is, hey, God said if then, and I did the if. And so he said then, right? Here's this. And so I want you to get to where you trust God in that way, and that you don't have to see your God, right? We walk by faith, not by sight, right? And so I don't need a golden calf to see. I need to trust that God that created the heavens and the earth that I worship because it's absolutely gorgeous, but that he's the one to be worshiped. He is the only one true living God, and everything else is just junk and is made up, pretend. And so here we sit, and God says, okay, what I expect of you is all the things they're going to teach you in kindergarten and first grade. I expect for you to learn to share. I expect for you to learn to listen and obey. I mean, all those things, it is, I don't know if you saw it or not, but did y'all see today that there was a kid in Jacksonville, Florida, who was 5 years old? And so he got up this morning, and his parents weren't up yet. And so he opened the front door, walked down the street to the Chick-fil-A, and ordered food. And they gave him food, and he sat down in a booth. He's 5 years old. He sat down in a booth, and they called the police. And the police came, sat down in the booth with him, called his parents, tried to, had to figure out where he lived or whatever. Went and got his parents, who were still in bed, brought him there. we can't be walking down the street to the Chick-fil-A at 5 years old, right? We have to know what the rules are in our house, and we have to be willing to obey what those are. And parents have to be able to do their part, right, in raising their kids that way. But we also have to learn to, hey, don't hit or bully. That we learn those things. We don't take the things we want by violence. Those are things that we're supposed to, just to get my way. We work together. We're not only cooperating, but we're compromising. These are all things that you learn in the first grade, kindergarten. These are the rules, we're supposed to give, that we're supposed to put others above ourselves in certain times, right? And for us as Christians, Jesus said, hey, it's the spirit of joy. Jesus, others, you, in that priority order. And that's how we're supposed to live our lives on a daily basis, not as some kind of, self-deprecating, I'm just so terrible, I'm the bottom of the list, and I'm just going to be unhappy my whole life because Jesus told me I had to be the bottom of the list. And no, it's not that at all. It's that in doing that, and we talked about being second on Sunday as well, right? That in doing that we find meaning and purpose and satisfaction and self-assurance in our lives here. We learn what our priorities are, what's important, and we learn discipline. And I say those things because every one of those things that I just listed are all required for us to accomplish things in this world. And they're difficult. They're hard. And so when God said to Jeroboam, you're going to be king, that had to be overwhelming. And that you're going to be a dynasty, that you're going to have kids and grandkids, and they're going to sit on these thrones. I mean, it sounds great because you're just like you're just sitting there with this, sipping a drink, and you've got a scepter in your hand. And you're going, woo, king, But you have to manage all these people and provinces, and you have to, governmental affairs, and there's the economy, and then there's, labor unions, and there's all this stuff. And just the overwhelming nature of that makes us want to say, I don't know if I want to do that or not. And so we choose other things instead. And those things are those idols that get in there and get in the way. The things that, we call coping mechanisms in our world. God says, I need you to do this. And we go, I would much rather, because that sounds really difficult and really hard and tedious, and maybe it doesn't sound like the most fun thing to do what you've asked me to do, Lord. I think I would rather eat some food and some fine desserts. I think I'd rather have a drink, an alcoholic drink. I'd rather smoke some weed and feel good about myself. And I think I'd rather, maybe smoke some cigarettes to be able to do that. Maybe look at some pornography. I think I'd rather have sex outside of my marriage, because it makes me feel alive and makes me feel like I'm attractive and wanted. And or maybe it's just that I lay around and just sleep to just escape it all, or that I do a little retail therapy or redecorating, renovation therapy, on our houses and all of that kind of stuff, or those houses I'm flipping, all of that. All of those things are idols that creep into our lives and take the place of the God that we serve. And so the if-then statement falls false, because we didn't hold up our end of the bargain. And so we miss out on the dynasty, the blessing that's there. Now, this is not working your way to heaven. This is a relationship with God. This is, hey, Jesus says, come and follow me. And that means being about his business, doing the things that he tells us to do. And those things in my life have been extraordinarily fun and productive and fruitful. And I have gotten to participate in things that are incredible. So I'll leave you with this. When you're doing the if-then statement, when God says this is the plan, this is what happens. Okay, I'm just going to give you a personal example. So I was pastoring a church in Knoxville, and we were meeting in a school. Then we were meeting we were meeting in different places. We met at a YMCA for a while, and our people were just like, when are we going to have our own place? Are we going to build something? Are we going to buy something? Are we going to rent something? Or what are we going to do? We just can't be, just kind of like the tide coming in and out, just washing around, going in a circle like a washing machine. And so our elders, we sat down and we were having a meeting. We're praying. Oh man, Lord, we'll do whatever you want us to do, right? We'll do whatever you want us to do. And and in the midst of that, I don't know that God was saying he wanted us to have a building at all. I'm not sure that was a priority for him, even though, we're always like, hey, let's do a building campaign. We need to have a really tall steeple, and we need to have a big sanctuary, comfy seats, and we need to, have all this stuff because all these other churches have those kind of things. And so our elders are praying, and somebody comes in and they're like, what are you guys doing? It's just somebody walked in our meeting, and we're like, oh, we're praying because we're looking for a place. And they go, did you know that there's a church for sale over here? I just saw it, just came on the market. It's over here on this back street. And so we left that meeting, and we said amen to our prayer. We went over there, we looked at it. We're like, man, this looks perfect. Price seems decent, and this could be us. And so we called a realtor, and we went and looked at it, and we walked around in it. We're like, man, this really looks, this is it. And I mean, it wasn't 24, 48 hours. We were at the bank trying to borrow money, because we got to jump on this. God's provided it. Look at this. This is right where God wants us, right in line with his will. And so we go to the bank, and the bank's like, okay, fill out all these forms, and we'll have meetings, and we'll talk about this. And 2 or 3 days later, we still hadn't heard anything. We called over there, and they're like, no, we're not loaning you any money. And we're like, Lord, what are you doing? Not going to loan us any money. We got to have money to buy this church that you provided for us right here, this building that we need. We got to have. And it's perfect. It's just like that church over there, and that church over there, and that church over there. And we'll be legitimate. We'll be a church with a building. And the bank said, no, we're not changing our mind. We're not giving you any money. And we're like, so we can't buy it. And then we're like, okay, it's our faith. We have a lack of faith. We're not believing it, enough. And so I left there. And one of the elders and I rode over to this place, to this church again. We're like, well, we'll walk the property. We'll do a prayer walk, and we'll rub that lamp some more. Get God to do what we want. And so we're walking around. I'm just being honest with you, right? Is that we're walking around the property and we're praying and everything. And this little kid is out in the backyard over here. My friend's over on the other side of the church, and I'm over here, and this little kid's out playing in the yard or whatever. He's probably, 9 or 10 years old. And I'm walking by, and he goes, what are you doing? I said, I'm praying. And he goes, for what? I said, we're thinking about buying this building. And he said, I love that building. He said, they had a flood in that basement. The water was 3 feet high. We had our boats out there, our model boats, and we were just running them around in the water down in that basement. And I was like, really? Because the realtor didn't tell us that they'd had a 3-foot flood in that basement, right? And so I'm like, okay, Lord, that was an interesting piece of information from a 10-year-old. And so I'm walking, and we're still walking around, and then guy pulls up in his driveway across the street. And it's a little farmer guy, a little older guy, and he's getting out of his truck, and he goes, hey, what are you doing? I said, I'm just praying, walking this property. We're thinking about buying it. And he goes, really? He said, you know about the flood? And I went, yeah, I know about the flood. He goes, do you know where they got all the wood for that church? And I said, no, I don't know where they got all the wood for that church. I said, it's not but like 10 years old. He goes, yeah. He said, their other building burned to the ground almost over on such and such, and they reclaimed all the wood out of that building that burned, everything they could use, and they put it in this building and built it with it. He goes, it's all a bunch of burned wood that they use for a lot of the stuff that they built in that church. And I went, is that true? And he goes, oh yeah, I watched them put it up because some of it was singed black, all this kind of stuff. They. And so that elder and I got in the car together, and I was sharing some of that stuff with him. He goes, man, I'm glad we didn't buy this place. And I was like, me too. And I said, if the bank had said yes, would you have bought it? Would you have voted yes? And he goes, absolutely. I'd have voted yes right there on the spot. We'd have got the money, take it to the realtor that day. And I went, yeah. So God protected us from buying this place, even though it was our will. We were desperate to buy this place, thought that was exactly what we needed, and God intervened. And I said, that's a relationship. That's a relationship with God. It's not always that he says yes, 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 yes. Sometimes he says no, because it's a relationship. It's the same as a parent with kids. And you don't always just say yes to your kids. You say no sometimes because you're training them. You're teaching them discipline about how to live their life so they'll be productive individuals in this world. Well, that's about our relationship with Jesus. And that's what I want you to have and want you to know him. Thank you for joining us tonight. God bless you. Hope you have a great week. Come join us for church on Sunday.